Dr. Branovich, you're muted.
My computer just shut off, and I just turned it back on again. So,
Okay.
lovely technology. Great when it works. All right, let's try this again. Good. Okay, so food gets in the stomach. All right, so once food gets in the stomach, the mechanoreceptors will cause the G cells to make a hormone that gets secreted in the bloodstream called gastrin. Gastrin is not secreted into the lumen of the stomach, it's secreted into the bloodstream. Now, gastrin is going to stimulate these parietal cells to make hydrochloric acid. Then it will also stimulate the chief cells to make pepsinogen. And then the stomach acid will cause the pepsinogen to auto-convert into the active form pepsin. So this is a zymogen form. Pepsin is able to auto-process itself in an acidic environment. So the acid actually helps this occur. Okay. Now this tension of the stomach is also going to start the stomach to contract. And these contractions, essentially, it's going to be a wave that starts up here, starts here, and it moves in this direction here. And it starts off because this is more muscular up here, it's relatively weak here, and it gets much stronger down here. It will contract at a rate of about 4 contractions per minute. And then the food, once it gets broken down, the stomach will empty by virtue of the relaxation of the pyloric sphincter. Gastric emptying usually happens over a few hours, but it depends on the food, essentially. Liquids are going to empty faster than solids. Also, foods with lots of calories will empty much more slowly than foods with low calories. Why is this? Well, it takes more time to break down foods with lots of calories. So if you eat a chip with some salsa, that's not going to distend the stomach very much. If you eat 3 burritos, that will distend the stomach a good deal and slow down gastric emptying. Acidic foods. Those will slow down gastric emptying. And this is the reason for this is that the proton receptors in the duodenal mucosa detect high level of protons. They send information via the myenteric plexus to the duodenum, and it gives the duodenum time to make enough bicarbonate from the pancreas to be able to neutralize the acid, essentially. So how fast does it empty? Depends on the type of food, essentially. Okay. Now, the mucosa of the stomach is folded into these rugae, gastric rugae. There are these multiple folds, and the epithelium also is organized into these little pits, and those pits are called gastric glands. Gastric glands. And the pits essentially are lined with epithelial cells, and these specialized epithelial cells secrete the things that are secreted into the stomach. So this essentially is an up-close picture of the rugae. Here's a little pit. Take a cross-section between the pit. Here's one of these pits down here at the bottom of the pit. Those cells are your stem cell population. So here's our highlighter here. Here's our stem cell population. These cells will divide. They differentiate as they come up here, and then they get sloughed off when they come up here. So these cells are younger than these cells up here. These cells are replaced very often. So the stomach has a high mitotic index. The stomach also has an incredible amount of mucus that it makes that protects it from the acid. The stomach is also blessed with a very rich blood system, and that also is going to feed it and make sure it divides quickly and gets replaced rather constantly. So the chief cell, as we said, makes pepsinogen. The parietal cell makes stomach acid. There are other cells, G cells, make gastrin, and then another set of cells, enterochrome-like cells, they make histamine. They also make serotonin. All right, so goblet cells make mucus. Parietal cells make hydrochloric acid. So these are the different cell types in the gastric gland epithelia. Chief cells make pepsinogen. G cells make gastrin. ECL, enterochromaffin-like cells, secrete histamine and serotonin. These are paracrine regulators in the GI tract. And together, they make this concoction called gastric juice. Gastric juice. The parietal cells make stomach acid by taking bicarbonate from the blood via the chloride bicarbonate antiporter. That chloride is brought in exchange for the bicarbonate. CO2 and carbon dioxide and water are used to make carbonic acid. This disjoins to bicarbonate, which is kicked out via this antiporter here. That is on at the basolateral membrane of the parietal cell. The proton then is excreted into the lumen via this proton potassium antiporter with chloride, and that's how you make hydrochloric acid. Proton pump inhibitors like omeprazole, esomeprazole, pantoprazole, rabeprazole, all these other prazoles, this is the protein they inhibit. That's a target of those particular drugs. Low bicarbonate levels, rather low chloride levels in the blood can prevent you from making sufficient amounts of stomach acid. Pepsin is made from pepsinogen. Pepsinogen is a zymogen. It autoactivates in the presence of acid. Pepsin will degrade denatured proteins that are denatured by the acid into shorter polypeptides that will then be further digested in the duodenum. So this is taking large proteins, digesting them into oligopeptides and polypeptides. Gastrin, with secretions from the vagus nerve, will cause the ECL cells to make histamine. And then histamine is going to be one of the things that will stimulate the parietal cells to make acid. And you can see this here. So gastrin is secreted into the blood. It stimulates ECL cells to secrete histamine. Histamine is also secreted into the blood. That stimulates the parietal cells to make hydrochloric acid. As the acid decreases the pH in the stomach, that will downregulate the G cells from making gastrin. So this is subject to negative feedback. Drugs like cimetidine and related drugs, rabitidine, things like drugs like that. Let's see, Zantac 75. These are antihistamines for the stomach. These bind the H2 histamine receptor. These drugs you can buy over the counter. Pepsid, Zantac 75, they block the H2 receptor. That's how they help you deal with an upset stomach. So here are the protective mechanisms of the stomach. Very tight junctions between those cells. High mitotic index. Mucus that is laced with bicarbonate. The impermeability of parietal and chief cells to acid. And then prostaglandins that will increase blood flow, increase mitotic index. And that's why drugs like NSAIDs, which block prostaglandin synthesis, can promote the formation of ulcers. So erosions of the stomach, those are peptic ulcers. Peptic ulcers tend to be relieved by eating, whereas duodenal ulcers usually made worse by eating. If you have inflammation because you have a breach of the mucosal barrier, that is called gastritis. Peptic ulcers tend to be due to infection of the stomach by Helicobacter pylori, and you treat those with a so-called triple or quadruple treatment. We have antibiotics plus proton pump inhibitors, and then bismuth sulfate to coat the stomach and prevent it to help it heal. Very good. Now we get to the small intestine. Small intestine consists of 3 different sections. The duodenum, which is the first bit of the small intestine, followed by the jejunum. That's the next 2/5. And then the ileum, the longest part, is the last 3/5 of the small intestine. The duodenum and jejunum will absorb most of the sugars and lipids and amino acids. It will also absorb a good deal of your calcium and iron. And then the ileum will absorb bile salts a good share of the vitamin B12, some of the water, and some of the electrolytes will be absorbed by the ileum. Small intestine is organized into these folds. These are called plica circularis. And then if you take a look at the plica microscopically, you can see that it is decorated with even smaller indentations that are called villi. This huge enfolding of the GI tract increases the surface area for absorption for the stomach. Excuse me, for the GI tract. So here's a little cartoon of the mucosa of the small intestine. So here's a villus. The villus has a blood supply that passes through it. It also a branch of the lymphatic system called a lacteal. A lacteal. And the columnar epithelia, you could see the main cell population or the enterocytes. Again, down here, you have the intestinal crypt. These are your stem cells. These cells will then move in this direction. They'll be sloughed up here into the intestine. You have a high mitotic index here. You have lots of goblet cells for making mucus, and then you have other cells called Paneth cells that secrete antimicrobial peptides. And if these cells start to grow uncontrollably, they'll start to make a structure that sticks out into the intestine, and that's what we call a polyp. Okay, looks like we're out of time for the day. We will pick this up on Monday, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. We'll get into
Dr.
Yes.
I had a question. What chapters are the final exam over?
Whatever we finish.
Okay.
That's as good an answer as I can give you for now. It depends what we end up finishing.
Okay.
All right. So there we are, and I will see you guys on Monday. Bye.